All right, a very good afternoon to everyone who is joining us today. My name is Dr. Sfiso Mnisi, and I'm the Vice Chair of the Dream for Life Africa. So what you are here for today is to experience one of our exciting conversations, Dream for Life conversations that we regularly host. And today I'm not alone. I am with our member of our board member, Dr. Nomonde Mabuya, who is also joining us. So I'd like to greet you and welcome you, Doctor, and thank you again for making the time to join us today.
Hi, thank you so much. Hi, it's good to be here. Thank you so much.
So it is a wonderful day. We are indeed honored to have in our presence Professor BONANG Francis Mohale. So this is how we are going to be handling things today. I will first read the bio of Babu Mohale to introduce him as one of the conversants of today. And then after that, I will hand over to Mr. Sbuso Squane, who is the chair of Dream for Life Africa. All right, so without any further ado, I'll just start reading the bio so that we know exactly who is gracing us today. Bonang Mohale is the Chancellor of the University of the Free State, Professor of Practice in the Johannesburg Business School, JBS, College of Business and Economics. He's also the Chairman of the Bidvest Group Limited and Chairman of SBV. He's a highly respected South African businessman who is known as much for his patriotism and his active role in seeking to advance the country's interests. He is the author of the best-selling book titled Lift as You Rise. The book was launched in November of 2018. It is a compilation of some of his spoken and written words in which Mohale reveals the issues he is passionate about, among them leadership, transformation, people development, constructive collaboration, and integrity. Bonang Mohale was the Chief Executive Officer of Business Leadership South Africa, which is known as BLSA, until June of 2019. Now, this is a forum which brings together the leadership of South Africa's most successful and influential big business and multinational investors to exchange ideas, facilitate effective dialogue with government and other stakeholders, and advocate for pro-business, economically sustainable policies and programs. Prior to joining BLSA, Mr. Mohale ended a distinguished term as Vice President of Upstream and Chairman of Shell South Africa at the end of June 2017. Mr. Mohale, who originally studied to be a medical doctor, has had a distinguished career at the helm and in the leadership roles of several major South African and multinational companies, which include Otis Elevators, South African Airways, Sanlam Limited, and Drake and Skull Integrated Facilities Management. He currently serves on the boards of Swiss Re Africa Limited, Rand Merchant Bank Limited, and SBV. Mr. Mohale has an impressive track record of building successful companies, delivering results, and making significant advances in transformation in the companies he has had the privilege to lead. He has even been vocal, courageous, and active proponent of transformation since the 1980s and played a leadership role in the Black Management Forum for over 33 years, where he was the president. Of course, a man like Mr. Mohale is worthy of a number of accolades, and he has been recognized for the amazing work that he has been doing through various awards. He was awarded the Free Market Foundation Luminary Award for 2019. This was in recognition of the outstanding courage and integrity he has displayed through difficult times in his contribution to the business community and for defending the rights of all South Africans. I must say that 2019, Babu Mohale, was a very wonderful year where you were really being recognized. And still on the year, he received a Lifetime Achievement Award in March of 2019 from BMF. Was also awarded the Momentum Friendship Blazer as recognition for being the first RSA Nation Building Champion in 2015. He's the winner of both the Country, RSA, and SADC Regional Titans Building the Nation 2014 CEO Magazine Awards. Bonang was also conferred with an honorary professorship in marketing management by the University of Pretoria, where he serves on the advisory council since 1992. In 2012, Baba was also awarded with the IPM CEO of the Year Award. Also received the SA Facilities Management Association Award, the Personality of the Year Award in 2007. And then in 1997, Blake Management Forum also awarded him with the Manager of the Year Award. He has also received the Presidential Award for his servanthood in South African industry and the economic empowerment of previously disadvantaged individuals. And this was back in 2001. And indeed, we feel privileged and blessed to have you, Babu Mohale, joining us today to be in conversation, also rather to offer the leadership conversation within Dream for Life Africa. So I will not waste any time because I believe that we are all hungry to just drink from this well of wisdom in the form of Babu Mohale. I will then hand over to our chair, Babu Skwane, who will be in conversation with Professor Mohale. So thank you. Skwane, over to you, sir.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mnisi, for welcoming all of us. And I must say that we are extremely honored and privileged to have Mr. Mohale in our midst. Mr. Mohale is an embodiment of ethical leadership, credible leadership. He is a great inspiration to all of us. And every time I listen to him speak, whether on radio or on TV, I just stop and listen to him because, I know that by listening to him, I'm gaining so much knowledge. I'll be inspired. I'll be empowered. So, Mr. Mohale, we are grateful to have you. And thanks for supporting our work at Dream for Life Africa. I know that this is the second time you come participate in our event. We thank you. And that shows that you are a leader that is humble. You are a leader who cares about young people. At Dream for Life Africa, our focus is mainly on grooming young people, preparing them for future leadership roles. We want them to become the next generation of leaders that will inspire, that will usher Africa into greatness. So, and as South Africa, we are extremely honored to have leaders like you. It's very rare these days that we can have leaders of your caliber. The leaders that we have, they've got smaller skeletons here and there, but you are one leader who continue to inspire us. You are one leader who give us so much hope that, no matter how the situation is in our country, at least we still got a leader like Mr. Mohale, Professor Mohale, who will inspire us, who will give us that confidence, that at least, our future looks bright. So we're grateful. And at some point, I even think to myself that I just pray that one day Mr. Mohale becomes the president of South Africa, and I hope that as I'm making this request now, maybe you're going to think about it because we need more leaders like you. So we are extremely grateful, Mr. Mohale, with those few words, and we are grateful to have you. We are honored, we are blessed to have you. So before we start, there's one thing that Dr. Mnisi forgot to mention about Mr. Mohale. Mr. Mohale is not only one of the most influential business leaders in our country, but he's also a great photographer. I picked it somewhere that he's also a great photographer. so that shows that you are one person, one leader who lives life in the fullest. And that is very important. So there is so much that we can learn from you. And the reason why we organize such sessions as Dream for Life Africa is to, make young people to learn from great leaders like you, to be inspired, to draw lessons from leaders like you, because we believe that we can learn a lot from you, as one of the greatest leaders in our continent. So we are greatly honored. I mean, and allow me to say some of the words that you once said, that role models must be humble, they must be accessible. And you are one of our role models who is living according to that. You're one of the role models who is accessible. So we're greatly honored. So as we get into the conversation, Mr. Mohale, before we start with everything else, how have you been coping in this pandemic? Welcome. How have you been coping in this pandemic?
Mangikale ngokubingelela Nkosi yami. Nginihloniphe kakhulu. Ngicela nje ukuthi ngoba i-bandwidth is a challenge these days. Eskom has resumed load shedding. Those who are not speaking, let's put ourselves on mute so that we don't hear your heavy breathing. So Mangikale ke ngokuthi because the conversation is expedient, that's the conversation. Uyabona ukuthi mina ngikhululekile ngisekhaya nayi imbiza yami yekofi ngithemba ukuthi nani ke niphethe ezenu lapho. So to answer your question, I was saying to Dr. Mabuya that we are living in unusually deadly times. And we are just grateful that we are still dodging this coronavirus pandemic. That we started by initially hearing numbers that didn't mean anything to us. Then the names started coming up and you could recognize some people that you know. Now, this thing is hitting the inner circle. And all of us have buried, not people in our streets, not people that we know, but family members, kith and kin, blood and sweat. So, masiqhubekeni ukunakekela Nkosi yami imbi lento kuthiwa amathanga ahlanzela abangana amabhodo. Ngibiyele kuwena ke Sigwane.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Mohale. Thank you so much. And indeed, it's not easy, but we are grateful that we're still surviving and we're still able to gather like this. And one of the things that, COVID-19, which is something positive actually, has brought to us is that we have started to appreciate the role played by, online platforms like this one that bring us together, that keep us connected. I doubt if it wasn't for COVID, maybe some of us wouldn't have known about these platforms, but now we know about them. So I think that's a positive thing, even though it's a negative thing. I think there's something positive that we can draw, from COVID-19. Thank you so much. So let's get into the serious business now. So this is how we're going to be conducting it, colleagues. I'll be in conversation with Professor Mohale, and then I'm also going to open the floor because we want this session to be interactive. We want you to get an opportunity to interact, to engage with Mr. Mohale. So, but before we get into the interactive part, I just want us I just want Mr. Mohale to take us back to his childhood. I understand, Mr. Mohale, that everything, your journey, started in Katlehong. And of course, most of us, particularly young peers, young people, we can relate, to growing up in the townships. We know how life is in the township, etc. Right? I want to know from you, as the journey started in Katlehong, how did it all start? How did you survive, the pressures, growing up in a township where there are so many challenges? How did you survive? How was the childhood? Take us back to your childhood days.
So Charles M., don't forget to mute yourself. We can hear your heartbeat.
Okay.
Skwani manguphoqe before ngikutshela ke ngokuthi ubonang ubuyaphi, just to acknowledge ukuthi we have just collectively been traumatized by the 2 weeks in July, where we saw things that we only saw on television, mostly to the north of Limpopo, and to see it happen in our own country, just 27 years into democracy, needs to be acknowledged. Indeed, we're in a spot of bother. We are tusa kakulu, and into entuse kakulu mina ukuthi the institutions that are constitutionally mandated to protect us stood by idly twiddling their thumbs and watched, if not actively encouraged, as we saw this wanton destruction of property. So for me, I think this was the intersectionality of many things, because it's nice to talk about these things in the presence of dignified greatness from the black pool of excellence. So the intersectionality of many things. One, I think there was a piece around ethno-tribalism. This is the first time in 27 years that we had a former president who printed T-shirts that were emblazoned 100% Zulu boy during his rape trial. But we are lucky because South Africa, unlike most of African countries, we have actively avoided these issues of tribalism. Secondly, I think there's also a piece around, that's probably 90% of the people that we saw, just rampant, wanton criminality. And then the last piece is the one that really interests me and should interest you as well. It's genuine desperation. The genuine desperation one could understand because, remember, we were just putting our arms around the 9 wasted years of state capture, where in 5 years, we stole 1.5 trillion South African rands, which is 2/3 of what it takes Edward Kieswetter to collect in 1 year from the South African Revenue Services. That on average, in the 9 wasted years, we are siphoning off probably 20 billion rands a year, every year, just to the 2 Zupta families. But we were already in a recession, not technical recession, when that happened, because Kwani, you and I were beginning to feel our discretionary purchasing power, therefore disposable income, on our back pocket being eroded probably in the last 10 years. As if that's not enough, Moody's joined Fitch and Standard & Poor's in rating us below investment grade, also colloquially known as junk status. And I'm hoping, Skwanuguti, you are allowing people to come in as they wait on the lobby so that they shouldn't also lose out. So when you are, as we stand today, we are at least 3 levels below investment grade, which means the cost of borrowing for government, for business, for Sgwani, you and I, and Dr. Mabuya, it's costing us much more just to borrow. Our debt is exactly the same. The interest has become that bigger. For the country, we were borrowing at a rate of 2.1 billion a day every day. So we now spend 20 billion just in servicing this debt. This is pre-COVID. When you look at the destruction, I think all of us must accept that it's not the 2 weeks in July. This thing has been long in coming, because you see, we chose deliberately, consciously, purposefully that we want to have a small South African police service that nonetheless is intelligence-led. So we are 100,000 women and men short in the SAPS. But instead of spending the money on intelligence, that's why we witness the monumental failure of intelligence. Not that we needed intelligence, because remember, we had 3 months when the Apex Court gave us an opportunity to write to the former president to say, what sanction do you think is appropriate for you now that you are in contempt of a court of law in the Zondo Commission that you yourself set up, that you wrote the terms of reference for? So in that 3 months, we did nothing to anticipate, to prepare, to plan. Therefore, when these riots, this looting happened, we didn't have enough cars to respond. We didn't have enough bulletproofs. We didn't have enough rubber bullets. We didn't have enough canisters of tear gas. We didn't have enough ammunition. And most of the malls that were banned, majority of them are diagonally opposite to a police station, by the way. So let me just end by just characterizing the loss so that we understand what smosheni kangaka. So for me, I think we have taken the economy of this country back 20 years. Some of those things we'll never be able to replace. You know, more than 350 people are now dead. 1,400 ATMs were destroyed or damaged. 120 million rand was stolen. 148 schools were also destroyed. 300 banks and post office outlets were vandalized. 200 shops, in fact, 200 shopping centers, I'm including malls, were looted and damaged. 11 warehouses, 8 factories, 161 liquor outlets, 3,880 stores that were looted. The economic impact is 1.5 billion worth of stock that was lost only in KwaZulu-Natal. I'm excluding Gauteng for now. 113 communication infrastructure. I'm talking here about masts, cellular, telephony, infrastructure that was significantly damaged. In KwaZulu-Natal alone, that impact was 20 billion that was lost to the economy, 50 billion nationally. So when you consider that Gauteng is 30% of the national GDP, KZN is 16, Western Cape is 14%, you understand why it will take us 20 years for us to get back there. But what really breaks my heart is the 50,000 informal traders that were affected. Because remember, in any mall, 90% of the people that are tenants there are small and medium enterprises. 40,000 businesses were affected, but 150,000 jobs are now at risk as we speak. Not even the blood bank was spared. They went in, fridge and spilled the blood in the full knowledge, which I might be hit by a rubber bullet, and this type of blood I might personally need. Of the 2 of the warehouses that were burnt, 2 of them belonged to pharmaceutical companies. So 49,000 vials of vaccine were stolen. Vaccine which is supposed to be kept at minus 70 degrees Celsius. So the focus now is on COVID-19, on the Delta variant. We've got the biggest population, more than 5 million of people who are living with HIV/AIDS. So antiretroviral drugs, medicines for diabetes, etc., were stolen. So it's against that background that we are having this conversation as we reflect and we introspect in conversation with Bonang, who was born in Binoni, but I didn't know Charlize Theron at that time, and met Susan, my lovely wife, when I was actually in standard 8. We got married when I was in standard 10. I was 17 years old. I say so in my books. In my book, I don't know why she said yes. She must have been smoking something, because at 17 you don't even have potential. In Katlehong, where I grew up, we moved there when I was about 6 years old. So all I know is really Katlehong. I went to K1. Babu Tauniani Lepile was my school principal. All the houses looked the same. There were 4-roomed houses. So I didn't even know that we were poor. The people who had really money, they would build a stoop, they'll take out the normal windows and put big windows, and they'll have a gate that closes on its own. Not because it was remote control, because they took a mattress spring and they put it, when you open the gate, you leave it, it will yank itself back. That's how we had self-closing gates at that time. So I grew up very happy because it bengazi ke mina ukuthi asiyahluphekela inkosi yami. Mangibuyele kuwena ke Skwani inkosi yami.
Professor Mohale, we have touched on a very critical issue. I think it's worth indeed having the conversation, the background that you gave earlier about, the situation that we experienced, in our country. but going forward, I mean, since you've touched on that critical issue, I feel that we can't leave it hanging, without actually assessing us, particularly in this group, as we are young people, that what role can we play? What role can we play? I know that our contribution can be too little, but what exactly can we do, especially as young people, to rebuild our country? Because you've just said that the situation took us back to the days of apartheid, to the days of poverty and so on. We have lost so much as a country, but what role can we, as young forward? The history has happened. The incident has happened, but now we're looking forward. What can we do as young people in our little corners?
Dr. Mohale? Before I answer that one, I see another young person has her hand up, Dr. Nomonde Mabuya. Let's take her first, and then we can talk about what young people can do. Dr. Nomonde.
Okay. All right. No, thanks, Dr. Mohale, for that insight. And I think it's important to reflect as people, and so that we then know where what's really informing us going forward. Let me switch on my video. I was going to say thanks for the insight. For me, if there's one thing that I really wish for South Africa, and especially for our young people, is for them to take their education seriously. It's very important that we talk education, education, education. Had we started that journey strongly even in 1994, all those people would be working now, contributing to the fiscus, growing our income base. We could have reduced the number of people who are getting SASSA grants, maybe significantly by 30%. What tends to worry me is we don't seem to be having a plan to address reducing that number. Instead, we seem to be having a plan to increase. So it's not a sustainable model. I see now there's talk of expanding the Social Security Fund. A new proposal has been put on the table. So I'm starting to wonder, what kind of generation are we building for South Africa? Are we building a generation that's going to depend on government for grants? Or are we building a nation that is resilient, that is going to be competitive in terms of the economy? So those are the things that must worry the young people. What kind of adult am I going to be, if I don't necessarily play in the competitive space? And I think the time is opportune in that we are now talking digitization, transformation for IR. So essentially, really, people can be propelled forward even more exponentially in terms of their dreams. They don't have to really think small anymore. We've seen some of the benefits of the research and the developments that we are getting. And a simple example is the vaccines we are currently using for COVID. We used to have a certain methodology of developing vaccines that has now been propelled by the new technology of mRNA to sort of help the nation. So the same thing applies to many industries. So our young people, if anything, don't be distracted by anything else. I know we are not in the ideal political space, but let's stay focused, because let's take our rightful place, because that's really what made us to be great leaders of today. If you think about our generation, we were poor, we were happy. Nobody came from a rich house, as you've outlined in your background, where you come from. That story is not very different from my story. I grew up in a township. I didn't grow up in Bryanston. So really, if I were to tell the same story, it's just the same story told over and over again. But what made us different? We stayed focused. We wanted education. We were hungry for success. And I think if there's anything, for me, our young people must just stay focused. Things will ultimately come right. Obviously, we must voice our unhappiness where we are unhappy. But I think let's not be distracted by what is important to build our own futures. Thank you.
Wow. Squan. Ngiyabona noSibusiso isandla sakhe siphakeme, uMuleleki noValerie hayi isandla ingalo yonke sendlula ikhanda Nkosi yami. Should we take them in that order?
Let's just take them in that order, Professor Mohale. Sibusiso, I think you're gonna go first. Please.
Thank you very much. It's an honor. It's an honor to be on this platform with the honorables, honorables Congress in this platform. However, I have a question for for Mr. Mohale, but for everyone as well who wanna patch in. So my question is to you, Mr. Fale, in accordance with your biography. You have dealt with a lot of leadership. Surely you have enough experience in terms of how to be a good leader. But then we are in a country where we're faced with a leadership crisis, where we have ministries going bankrupt. We have unemployment that is very high in terms of youth, including myself in that. We are talking a stats of 74.4 unemployment of youth people. Are we having, my question precisely, are we having a leadership crisis in South Africa? My second question to you, Mr. Mohale, is the issue of tribe. Do you think the vandalism that occurred in KwaZulu-Natal, can we describe it as tribalism attacks, or it was poor black people who were reacting to a promiseless 27 of democracy, where they're still living under a very unbelievable circumstances, which some of them they're even unable to get primary health care. We've seen tremendous people on our grounds complaining about health, the simple health care after 27 years of democracy. So are we having an issue of tribe? Also, are we having an issue of leadership in South Africa? Thank you.
Muleleki.
Dumelang, Dr. Dumela, Professor, and everyone, or more calling. It's really an honor and a pleasure to actually have a conversation with people of your caliber. The only thing I wanted to pass to Dr. Mawande and Professor Mohale is we can see that the solution is needed, but I'm struggling to understand what is the problem with the youth. I think we have a situation whereby we want to implement all sorts of things in terms of how we uplift the youth and stuff like that, but I'm struggling to understand where is the issue precisely. And just to maybe you guys, Professor and Doctor, can actually highlight, and everyone who's in the panel, where is the problem, so that we can come with a solution that is going to address. Because I don't think we understand, or that if we do, I don't think we've been serious in analyzing the depth of the problem. My second point is in terms of the comment that was made by Sibusiso. I think Sibusiso, the issue in terms of the looting, you know, we have the situation that has happened of the looting. It was something, like Prof said, it was long overdue. You can't have so many youth who are sitting in the townships without any activity in the economy. And if you look at the level at which there's closure of FETs, that is my biggest issue. To say, I don't think the high schools are catering enough skills to uplift the community. Number two, the things that are supposed to give the youth skills have been closed down. In Soweto, I am right now in Meadowlands, majority of the FET colleges have been closed down. And unfortunately, we are allowed, because we are an inclusive country, we have foreign nationals that we cannot compete with because we're not skilled enough, and then the result in violence. So I don't know how Professor Mohale would really like to address the issue. Where is the issue exactly, so that as a leader I can actually say, okay, I can see clearly, vividly, here's the issue, here's the solution I'm going to try to implement. Because we're coming with European solutions, but Africa is quite dense. It's quite dense.
Thank you. I saw Valerie.
Yes,
Valerie.
good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for the opportunity as well. And thank you so much, Dr. Mwande and Professor Bonang, for your availability. Just to touch on everybody and what they have spoken about, as a young female myself, I'm actually going to speak on what Sibusiso was saying with regards to, is there a leadership problem in South Africa? And I believe that there is. I think there's the leadership problems speaks to specifically a lack of accountability. I think we do not showcase accountability enough, and we feel as if though holding people to account takes away from their dignity in some sense. And I feel as though with the riots, it was a matter of people were opposing holding the former president to account and viewing it rather as a racial undertone, perhaps, that spoke to it. So how do we address the issue of leadership, but more specifically with regards to accountability? Because responsible leadership is needed in South Africa, definitely. But I think responsible leadership needs to come to the forefront of saying people that are in leadership position also have a sense of accountability that they need to showcase. And why is that lacking? Why do we lack a sense of accountability? And when we do hold people accountable, it becomes a racial thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie, for that.
Sorry, just to interrupt you, sorry. On this issue of which Valerie's just raised, which is of accountability. Accountability is a problem, Continental. We've got some guests here also from other African countries. So I'm sure they can attest to that as well. So guests, if you want to express yourself, especially around the leadership crisis that we have in the continent, feel free also to engage. I hand over to you, Prof.
Maybe let me take Lishilo and Charles for their input, and then I will consolidate all of them in my responses. So Muleleki and Valerie, your hands will get tired. You can drop them now. Lishilo?
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for this time. I really appreciate it. My questions and comments are really about the situation that we are in. I think you've given such a great backdrop of what's going on in South Africa with really great statistics. And the question was really that fact that you are such a great and decorated man in terms of your career, what you've achieved. The one thing I've picked up from that was that you are able to make things happen. And based on the questions that everyone is asking, I kind of think that it's tied to making things happen. But then the question is, a lot of people have these dreams, but they never voice them out or they never share them with other people. I guess, for everyone's satisfaction, with all the questions that have been asked, and being the gentleman that you are, with the success you've had to date, how do you make things happen? For us to be able to obviously achieve all these big dreams that we have for this country, I can sense that everyone here is working on something. Dream for Life Foundation, for example, is one of them. I personally know Sibusiso from our days at UJ and church. And ever since then, I haven't been around him, but he's been someone that's been able to make things happen. Dr. Mabuya, I don't know her. I've just seen, but from the conversations she's just had, she's been able to highlight that she was married for 35 years. It means that she's been able to make something happen. I guess, as you could pick up, the resounding question is, how do you make things happen?
Charles?
Thank you very much. I would like to thank you for giving me this opportunity. And what I've realized that I found a link about this meeting in one of the social media platforms. And I can see that I'm calling from Malawi, which I've seen that there's a predominance of people from South Africa. But I see there's a lot of things which are very similar in as far as youth. We have a project which we are trying to address youth unemployment for graduates. We call it Youth Graduates Youth Funyash Malawi. And from the statistics themselves, like in Malawi, almost 75% of Malawi population is youth. And there are a lot of problems which are coming out. And when you hear sentiments from older people like me, because I'm not youth, you hear sentiments like the youth are lazy, the youth are entitled, the youth they lack the patience. And these are people like me saying that when I'm employed, I have a stable job, and I don't understand the dynamics which these young people are facing. And because of these generational challenges, I think we have missed an element of understanding the state of the youth in the contemporary discourse. And it worries me because I know South Africa dynamics and Malawi could be different, but I see this as a global phenomenon, which we are like sitting on a time bomb. Because if you follow the events in like the ones which started the Arab Spring, starting from Tunisia when Mohamed Bouazizi set himself ablaze, and it escalated, and the whole thing changed. So mine is a concern where it seems there isn't the right way we have figured out to address the challenges youth are facing. And when you see these violences, destruction of property, there are a lot of things which are taking place, including unemployment, because we only understand when we are in that situation. And I believe a lot of youth, young people out there, if they're given the right platform and kind of help them to take those leadership roles, there is a way this can be addressed. Thank you.
Charles, thank you very much for that, my dear brother. Before I answer them systematically, to you, let me say, tikulanderani ku South Africa.
Thanks very much, Prof.
Dichukera ku Zomba, dikupita ku South Africa.
I like that.
Thanks, my dear brother. So let me start. I will combine some of them because the themes are almost the same. I loved what Dr. Nomonde Mabuya said, by the way, because it's emblematic. It's the journey that all of us have walked. It's the stone in our shoes, the scars on our back. We share a commonality as Black people that is truly, truly extraordinary. So let me start with Sibusiso about what it takes to be a good leader. And I'll be brief in the interest of time. So first, it requires some sort of a compelling vision that tomorrow on a composite basis will be substantially better than today. That's what gives people hope. Secondly, it needs courage. You can't call yourself a leader when you are lily-livered. Ngesizulu kuthiwa umkhonto wegwala waphelele nje. Wasala ulola athi ngisakuhle. Uzuphela umkhonto. Lastly, it's about integrity. This is the one that's less sexy because this word leader presupposes followership. So leadership, it's about getting things done through other people as well as being genuinely obsessed with the development of others. It starts first with the who, then the what. It finds it easy to palate, highlight, and celebrate others. Leaders are not self, but they're other-centered. Sibusiso also asked, is what we saw tribalism? I've already answered that. Because when I started, I said, it's an intersectionality. It's a combination of many things. So it's not tribalism at all. At all. We don't have a problem of tribalism in South Africa. Sometimes we act in a xenophobic manner. And you know, one thing about Black people, they think xenophobia and therefore foreign national are other Black people who come from the continent. But they don't think it's white people who come from East European countries like Russia, Yugoslavia, etc. So if you are white, you've got no skills, you are here illegally, it's okay, we accept you. But if you are like Charles, you come from the warm heart of Africa, we say, you see these foreign nationals. That's what apartheid has done to us. Remember that Africa we had no borders. Our migration followed the Nile. That's why you find Omtungwa or Kuman in deep rural KwaZulu-Natal, in Emondlo and Enkandla, Langanyanga and Kukuletu. But you find them in southern Zimbabwe and in northern Tanzania. Kumalo. So we migrated, especially during the Fakali, when King Ushaka was wreaking havoc, not Dingiswayo. Moleleki asks, what really is the issue with youth? So I think our problem, Moleleki, is the stubbornly high levels of unemployment, number one, which then lead to increasing levels of poverty and increasing levels of inequality. And I'll submit that it's relative inequality that leads to insurrection. So the elements that were present in the Arab Spring are here imminent, clear and present danger. Why South Africa has not gone up in flames, I'll put it to the patience of our people. So how does the problem of youth manifest today? You just have to look at the numbers, my brother. As Busiso is right, youth unemployment is 74.7%. That's 8 out of 10 young people are unemployed. 30% of households have both parents, a man and a woman, a mother and a father. Only 30%. 6 million young people have never seen their father. They don't know their father. Today, 17 million people are on social security. Pre-COVID, only 16 million were gainfully employed. During the COVID period, we lost 3.2 million jobs. Net, 2.2 million. Unemployment today is 11.7 million people that are unemployed. If you estimate that on average, they look after 5 people, you can see that 35 million South Africans live below the poverty datum line. 10 million young people are not in employment, education, or training. That's a powder keg that's waiting to explode. Anything will set it alight. It's a tinderbox. When they're unhappy about a derby between Chiefs and Orlando Pirates, could have set this off. So it's not the incarceration of the former president to 15 months in jail. We don't have a problem of tribalism at all. FET closures, this is where we didn't do ourselves a favor. I don't know why we closed them, because we used outcome-based education, which is a model that works best in developed countries like Canada. In Germany, they also went through the Second World War, and they benefited from the Marshall Plan, the whole of Europe, especially Germany, and with Japan after the First World War. By the way, that's where we got our Spanish flu from. The first of the 6 pandemics that have plagued us. February of 1918, it ended. In April of 1920, it came in 4 waves. It killed 20 million people. The war itself killed 17 million people, infected and affected 500 million people. That was 1/3 of the world population at that time, even though it didn't originate in Spain, by the way, but we still call it the Spanish flu of 1918, 1920. So how does this problem of youth manifest today? I will not unpack it in the interest of time, just regurgitate probably 4 no more than 6 things. Number 1, inequality is widening. Racism is at an all-time high. Black graduates are roaming the streets hopelessly. Public education has collapsed. Public health care continue to fail the poor and the vulnerable. Crucial infrastructure is laying barren. All we had to do was just maintain it. And lawlessness has now become an epidemic. So in that environment, what can we do and what should we do? I'll come back to that. You see, talking about FET colleges, in Germany, they are Europe's #1 economy and the biggest economy. They catch you at standard 8 or standard 10. You call it grade 10 and grade 12 today. You don't even need to go to college. They make you a motor mechanic. And by just that act, it's called vocational training, you get straight into the middle class. The minimum that a mechanic is paid is 10,000 US dollars per month. I didn't say euros. Man, you're into the middle class. And look at Germany, all the cars that are enduring and luxury and aspirational come from Germany, starting with Porsche, Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Audi, even the people's wagon, Volkswagen, is made in Germany because they teach you to make the best cars in the world and to maintain them when they're broken, to fix them. That's how you build an economy, by people who can work with their hands. Not everybody goes to college. Before apartheid, only 7% of the population went to institutions of higher learning. We increased that to 11%. What about the other 89%? Those are artisans, electricians, millwrights, fitters and tanners. The apartheid government used institutions like Transnet to create those. You know, today, I pay more per hour to my plumber than I do my cardiothoracic surgeon. Muleleki, I've spoken to briefly the issue of foreign nationals. The way to think about the continent of Africa is the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement has now been launched and is being executed. That's our salvation. Because South Africa alone, there's only 60 million of us. We can't compare ourselves with the US of A. They've got 300 million people. It's a market. You can sell them cars and fridges. 60 million, it's not enough for Samsung to survive. But in the continent, there's 1.3 billion of us, 55 countries, we speak more than 3,000 languages. Continental GDP is 3.2 billion US dollars. We have 30.3 million square kilometers of pristine coastline. In this continent of Africa, everything that the world needs is found here in terms of mineral resources as either #1 or #2. And yet we are referred to as the dark continent. Of the world's poorest people, you find them in Africa. Of the 1.4 billion people who have got no access to any form of energy whatsoever, not just electricity, 647 million of them are found in Africa. And yet here the sun shines 340 out of 365.25 days. But the World Authority on Solar is Germany with only 3 months, 90 days of sunshine. 3 of the biggest rivers in the world, including the mighty Zambezi, it pummels at the Vic Falls at a rate of 130,000 cubic meters per minute. enough to generate hydroelectric power to supply the whole continent and have access to export to Europe. Wind, we even have cities named after the wind. Terecha, the Windy City, and Port Elizabeth. We could go into the middle of the ocean and harness this. Valerie, lack of accountability. Valerie, absolutely correct. So I think from our political leaders, we demand three things. One, ethical leadership. Of course, it's tautologous, because leadership can't be anything else but ethical. But for emphasis, we say ethical leadership. Because you see, in Africa, when we talk about servant leadership, we say the best amongst us lead with a heart of a servant. Servant leadership does not mean a leader with many servants. My grandmother used to say, the higher up the organization you go, the more accessible you should be, and the most humbler you must become. Because as the title of my book says, we want to lift as we rise, because we rise by lifting others. It's manifestly in our interest. On our own, we're not going to make it. Together, we can do that, which on our own will take us inordinately long. Secondly, we want absolute transparency from our leaders. Lastly, we want this notion of final accountability. You can't steal 1.5 trillion and get away with it and there are no consequences. You can't call yourself a minister of health and you steal 150 million through digital vibes in the midst of a pandemic. Now we are told that there's vaccine hesitancy, the numbers are coming down. Department of Health gets on a communication campaign, they say, no, we have got no money because we have stolen it. It can be. Lishilo Siopo says, how can we make our dreams to happen? So first, I think, Lishilo, I would say at a personal level, I think you need to be happy with yourself and live in the present moment. To develop close, personal, intimate relationships with other human beings, not with things. Lastly, live a balanced life. But I wanted to share with you why I think we are such an amazing, good quality human beings and why we are blessed in this continent. So this thing called skills, knowledge, and independence, we must take seriously. Because for me, I think three things Africans have learned in the continent. One, that these Uhuru presidents that stay on for 40 years are not good for Africans. Number two, that even the good guys left on their own eventually become the bad guys. Lastly, that we need viable opposition to keep the good guys in check. We said to the rest of our colleagues, brethren in the continent that no. You see, South Africa were different. Our leaders spent 27 years in Robben Island, therefore they are incorrigible, meaning they are incorruptible. How wrong we were. Eh? Very wrong indeed. So I think we need the type of leadership that genuinely cares about Africa, that can rewrite the story of Africa to be different, that is genuinely focused on an African child. Because again, education is our only salvation. There are very few things that can cause you to transcend social classes. And one of them is education. Education matters because when you are educated, it is impossible for you to be fooled by politicians. So, Nkosi yami, Skhwana, mangibuyele kuwena, ngicabenge ukuthi ngisithinte zonke bebazibuzile, ngisibhale zonke, ngathi ngizasihlanganisa ngithi ezinye, ukuthi ngikuphi isikhathi sakho.
Thanks so much. Yeah, there is one question actually that Charles asked, and Charles, maybe you can unmute yourself so that you can be heard on your question. He asked a very important question. Charles?
So Charles' question was 75% of the population in Malawi is youth, and that the Arab Spring that started in Tunisia, how can we ensure that in South Africa here, and indeed in the continent, we are proactive, not just resilient, but pro-zilient in addressing it. That's why I thought I'd actually dealt with it in my summary, but you are the boss. Charles, if you think there's anything else that I need to touch on, the boss, Usgwan, has given you permission.
Yes, actually he wrote the question, Tom. He said his question is, can we advance entrepreneurship through venture creation, startups, and MSMEs? So that's Charles' question. Oh, he's here.
That one is on the chat line, yes.
Yeah. Do you want to elaborate, Charles, on your question before answered?
Yes, we have a series of publications which are done by a South African company called Finmat. It does some publication about the state of micro, small, and medium enterprises in countries. So in Malawi, we have those publications. We had one in 2012. We also had one in 2019, and based on the young population in Malawi, 42% there are young people who are engaged in micro, small, and medium enterprises. So there's evidence from that young people are doing everything possible. But now the challenge which the young people have is the environment which they operate. It results them to operate informally, because most of them, if you start with our education system, like in Malawi, there is little which is given to make somebody know about running a business. That's number one. And even the curriculum itself doesn't make one employable. So when you leave school, you are at the mercy of the informal sector, which doesn't give you any option. And we currently in Malawi, they have passed what they are calling an SME order, where 60% of government contracts, they have to be given to indigenous population. But the challenge is the corruption here in Malawi is very high, that even if there's an order which was gazetted, it is not implemented. And you find that those entrepreneurs who are capable and the youth who are even below there, they don't have skills to run businesses, they don't have access to capital. Bank loans in Malawi are just expensive. We are talking of 23% interest rate. Inflation is high, and but there is evidence that entrepreneurship could be a way, because if you look at like the population in Africa, South Africa, Malawi, if you break them down, graduates, those who are under casual labor, those who are, there is a possibility that some can be absorbed in this informal sector by providing some incubation activities where they are given training on how to run a business, and automatically that can absorb the unemployment rate to at least minimum levels. So I was thinking if there can be that discussion, but I know the challenge will be the conducive environment to most of these young people. Thank you.
Charles, you're absolutely correct. So I look at other hands when they come up. Squad, I don't see any. So let me answer Charles' question and be a little bit philosophical. So one, entrepreneurship is that ability to create something. Creativity is thinking new things. Innovation is doing new things. Entrepreneurs are about doing. These are the people who thrive in risk. They go to bed and wake up with sweaty palms in the middle of the night as to how they're going to pay their own employees or how they're going to pay their own bonds. You need a particular mindset. So in South Africa, like in the continent, the number one constraint is access to market. 40% of the economic activity in the company is in the value chain, in the supply chain, not in the BEE 20% ownership. So young people want companies not to give them charity and corporate social investment, but for these companies to be their customers. So that when you make bolts, you can go to Score Metals and say, we'll buy bolts from you as a customer and pay you in 7 days because cash flow to you is the lifeblood of your business. Number two is skills, knowledge, so that you know the difference between income and cash. Many people run their own businesses, money comes in and they buy a gold chain. That's worth 300 grams. I don't know why we like wearing our money just to show that we have arrived. And when the next truck comes, you're supposed to pay, the money is finished because you didn't know the difference between income and cash. Thirdly, of course, is finance. There are a lot of Black young people that have brilliant ideas. They can't bring those ideas to market because they don't have friends, family, or fools that can back their ideas, like in the Jewish community, in the Muslim community, or even in the Lebanese community for that matter. We don't believe in each other. We don't patronize one another's businesses. Jewish people don't subscribe to the Sunday Times to be delivered to their shops. That's too easy. They wake up in the morning and walk and pass 6 shops to go and buy it from another Jewish person's home and shop. So when a Jewish person has a piece of land in Sandton, can bet your bottom dollar that the architect is going to be Jewish, the builder is going to be Jewish, the electrician is going to be Jewish. With us, when you have money, you don't even want anything that looks African, not even the art on your walls. Not even the architecture of your house. We go for Tuscany, that's found in Italy. And yet when Dutch people land here, they build Dutch houses that reminds them of home. Italian people, when they've got money, they build Italian homes so that it feels like something familiar. When a Black person has money, he grew up on brown bread, so as I close, Charles, you know, what I find helps for young people is 3 things, and I said I'll come back to that. Number 1 is access, number 2 is quality, number 3 is relevance. You see, when you have a fearless and determined president of the country I'm talking about, everything is possible. When you have a president that is excited about young people, anything is possible. When you have a president that is excited about transformation to fundamentally break with the past, anything is possible. When you have a president that puts Africa's child in the center of everything that they do, anything is possible. You see, we shouldn't allow our challenges to detract us and therefore stop us. The story of Africa must be different because we made it different. It depends on us. It will take bold decisions, including how we choose our leaders, to make sure that as Africans, we come out of this self-perpetuating vicious cycle of abject poverty. Poor parents bring up poor children. A poor mother begets a poor child. And yet we know that when you put a smartphone in the hands of women, not only does the nutrition, health, and education of their own child improve, but that of the entire society and community from which they come. So issues of gender equality and pay parity, we must take seriously. The pandemic has taught us that 8 countries that have women as their head of state have dealt better with the pandemic than those that are led by men, including New Zealand, Germany, and the Scandinavian countries. Skwan, I'm back to you, man.
Prof, you have touched a very important point about us as Africans working together, which is something that is lacking, especially amongst us as Black people, And I believe that if we can work together, if we can support one another, surely we can achieve, in a great way, we can achieve much. And the question, therefore, to us as young people, especially those who are interested in entrepreneurship and so on, what ways do you think we can employ to ensure that we work together, as people of various countries within the continent? Because I guess that we need to promote for example, trade that is happening amongst countries. For instance, it has to be easy for one to move goods from South Africa to Malawi, for instance, from Malawi to Zimbabwe, for instance. So, considering the fact that our leaders have actually failed to create a system that allows that to happen on our own as young people, I'm coming back to the point of young people. What can we do to ensure that we support one another in terms of our businesses, our entrepreneurship ventures, for instance? What can we do? For example, one person in Zimbabwe has, let's say, for example, is selling, let's say, sugar. Another person, let's say, in Tanzania is selling some avocados. So, how do you think we can be able to work together to support one another so that at least we can drive our continent forward?
This is important. This is important because let me start first by looking at why Stellenbosch has the highest concentration of dollar billionaires. One is because all of them speak Afrikaans. Number 2, it's because they support each other and one another. Thirdly, because they work together. Capitec was formed in Stellenbosch. Other Afrikaner people said, no, we'll bank with you. No, we'll give you money to start a bank to compete with the Big Four. Piet Mouton of PSG worked with Whitey Basson on the company called Zida and TLG, which is an acronym for the logistics company, which owns, amongst others, Cape Spare. They fight, Afrikaner people fight. But there are very few things that unite them. One of them is the oppression of the Black people, so that they continue to give them cheap reservoirs of labor. Number 2, even if they fight, they remind themselves, but what's the vision? Where are we trying to go? And they go back to the vision. Thirdly, when one starts a business, it's so easy to raise money amongst Afrikaner people themselves. You can count the number of Uber billionaires in Stellenbosch. Number 1 is Johann Rupert, because his father, Anton Rupert, created this wealth. I've spoken about Whitey Basson of Shoprite Checkers, the Mouton family of PSG, and Whitey Basson also owned Steinhoff, starting with Pepco, where the majority of the people who buy there are you and I. But when one has a brilliant idea, like Silicon Valley, they plant their seed there, it's called venture capital, and say, go and try it, knowing that they might lose it. Let me close by giving a frightening statistic. from 1994, after we became free, until 2020, that's just last year. In a democratic South Africa, we created the most stupendous amount of wealth for African people. White Tibason made 40 billion in that period of time. The guy who started Capitec, 20 billion. And Capitec, 98% of the customers are you and I. They've got 13 million customers as we speak. Skwan mangiye ke lapho. Ufuna siqede nini ithi 1424.
I'm actually not sure in terms of your time, Mr. Mohale. How much time do you have for us?
Masibuze uDr. Nomonde Mabuya ukuthi ufuna siqede nini.
Yeah.
Her hand is up.
Yes. Sbu, I'm going to leave, but I do have an idea that I wanted to plant the seed on because we have a youthful audience today.
Yeah.
I want us not to lose sight of what needs to be achieved because some of the things are very practical. I mentioned the issue of technology. Ne? I think what we need, it's a information exchange of some sorts. Let me give you an example of what I'm talking about. There is a financial information exchange, which means if you apply for maybe a policy or things like those, people tap into that data, they can check who you are, and essentially they can check your profile online. There's also, to a certain level, an information exchange on health, but we don't have information exchange on SMMEs or youth issues around the continent. So that's really a starting point that we get. Let's get to know what is at our disposal. So as a thing that would probably appeal to the youth is to try create an information exchange around SMMEs in Malawi, SMMEs in Ghana, people of your age. Start there. Create data that is meaningful. Because once you've got it, you can sell it to Google, you can partner, you can get into things. So I just wanted to plant that before I leave, because that's within our control. Let's get the data, let's get partners that we can partner with, and let's start small. You don't have to have 1 billion in your bank. You start small. There's 16 people in this platform, and if you have each part of SADC represented, gather the data, create a platform, and start small. And let's see where it takes you. So I wanted to plant that so that you can think about. Thank you. I'm going to exit and leave in a few minutes, in another 5 minutes. I'll listen for 5 minutes, then I'll exit.
Thank you very much, Doc, for raising those comments. It's important that we create a database so that we can be easily connected to one another. You know, it doesn't matter where we are in the continent. So before we close, we will take the final round of questions. If you've got any question, just feel free to ask. Please show up your hand if you've got a question. Otherwise, if there are no more questions, okay, Lishila's got a question. Anybody else? Anybody else who's got a question? So I guess at this time, Prof, I hope you don't mind to be asked anything, even within your business life, you know, because we're just trying to wrap. So feel free to ask anything about Professor Mohale. This is an opportunity for you to engage with him. So we've got Lishila, we've got, who else has got a question? Okay, going once, going twice. Okay, Valerie has got a question. Okay, so we will take those 2 questions and then, okay, Sibusiso has got a question as well. Yeah, so we've got Lishilo, we've got Valerie, and we've got Sibusiso. So those are our final questions. And then, you know, Professor can just wrap up and then I make some closing remarks. So go ahead, Lishilo.
Thank you so much, Sibusiso.
No, she was also putting up your hand. Okay, go ahead, Lishilo.
Oh, thank you so much once again. And this has been quite a great discussion that we've had. I think it was very insightful and all the ideas that have come through. Firstly, I wanted to say, I think it's a great idea that we keep each other's contact details and that we can actually go ahead and explore this idea and maybe many others. But the other question that I had, which I think is going to stem from maybe that action of continuing these conversations, particularly around Dr. Mabuya's question, idea, was it's a question I posted in the chat to say, on the backdrop of what we've discussed today, how can we as South Africa be a modular producer of goods and services of any kind? Like how not North Korea, but South Korea has been so successful in these years. We consume most of their products and services too. And then you also look at Japan. Japan has been such a stellar modular producer of goods. Most of the big companies in the world are coming from there. And I'm just particularly highlighting these two because of their previous struggles that South Africa also had. And I think in some cases, South Africa was way better than they were during the Union of South Africa, and then when we became the Republic of South Africa. So it was how, given the fact that our politicians in the past 27 years haven't set up the economy and the policies, the movement of money, and all these things, are that as private citizens, how can we then move South Africa towards a point where it's a successful modular producer of all these goods and services that could be consumed by the world? Thank you so much.
Valerie?
Yes, thank you so much. Mine's not a very just generic question. I just wanted to find out the title of Professor Bonang's book, please. That's all I wanted to know. Thank you so much. And also where I can get it. Thank you.
Valerie, yours is easy. It's called Lift as You Rise, Major Bookshops, including exclusive books and CNA, amongst others.
Thank you very much.
Firstly, I would also like to extend my words of gratitude to Mr. Sosquan as well, the whole candidates of this platform. I would also like to thank the opportunity given to speak to such Honorable Mr. Mohale. Also, I wanted to extend on what he talked about on the issue of unity and how it has dismantled Black South Africa or even African as a whole. I think the likes of Steve Biko, they were right when they said self-hate is one of the amongst situations or things that will hold most majority of Black people back. They won't progress enough because of the self-hate that is within us. Also, I wanted to ask specifically, but I'll just pose a question. I wanted to ask, when you talked about the issue of education systems, you mentioned Germany is one of the best education systems. I'm not sure. Also, Singapore is regarded as one of those countries that has best education system. So I wanted to ask just simply, do you think that South Africa has an unprogressive education system, or maybe better word to use an inappropriate education system, because we started with from my session was OPE, and then from OPE we went to CAPS. What's your take on our education system as a whole? Do you think it's unprogressive or what? Thank you very much also.
So we'll take Nozi as the last one.
Yes, thank you so much for this opportunity. It's very inspirational and informative. Thanks for organizing, and thanks for Professor Bonang for availing yourself. One of the things that I have, I think I would say I have noticed, is that it is very difficult for young entrepreneurs to really get their foot in the door. This is like giving them a chance, the ability to start out as entrepreneurs. A lot of I'd say companies do not trust them. They cannot afford them the opportunity. There's not even programs to help them, build up their capabilities and their capacity. that is one of the things that I have seen. You find that mostly it's focused on already big known companies instead of giving these entrepreneurs a chance and seeing what it is that they can do, building them up so that they can also in the future hire more people. And then the other thing that I've also noticed is, unfortunately, amongst us Black people, is that we tend to fear and we don't trust each other. We don't want to empower one another. It's like you want to be seen as the successful person in your neighborhood. You know, I'm more successful than my neighbor. That is one of the things that I think is failing us as Black people. Instead of us empowering ourselves and lifting each other up, so that we can build a society such as the Jews that you mentioned, you know, the Lebanese that you mentioned. If we take away that fear and we begin to trust each other. FNB has recently launched a property stock fair where more than 11 people can gather together and invest in property. But if we don't trust each other, if we don't see each other as a unity, you know, we tend to see each other as individuals more than a unity, then I don't see us moving forward in that regard. Those are my comments, and thank you again for this wonderful opportunity.
Sibusisa Skale, mangivale ke nkosi yami. I'll start with Sis Nozi. To get the entrepreneur's foot in the door, sometimes we don't even have to think complicated things. So to have Pick and Pay and Woolworths, and Checkers and Spar, to have a dedicated section just for locally produced stuff or black hair products should not be too difficult. Our government could have done us a favor by saying, when we open up malls in Soweto, in Langanyanga, and Guguleto, we'll kill the black shop owners. Therefore, when you open a mall in Alexander, it must be owned by Alexander shop owners. Same in Soweto, same in Kwamashu, but they gave it to the usual suspects. The same with giving casino licenses, because there were no casinos in South Africa before 1994. All of them were in the former homeland areas. And again, to say we are going to give those licenses just to black people and to women in particular, I think would have gone a long way. Let me just make one other example. You know, we have more than 740 state-owned enterprises and state-owned companies. Had we put a black person as the MD, group CEO or president, allowed them just to serve 5 years, in 27 years, with 20% of them having failed, we'll be having 3,000 black people and women with a demonstrable track record, so that when Kenya Airways and Ethiopia Airways are looking for a CEO to headhunt, to poach, they'll be looking south at this 84-year-old award-winning South African Airways. Lishilo talks about the producer of goods and services in a modular fashion like South Korea and Japan. 1960, Zambia and Ghana donated money to South Korea. That's how poor it was. 20 years later, in fact, 1960, the economy of Zambia was twice as big as that of South Korea, twice as large. 20 years later, the economy of South Korea was 20 times larger than that of Zambia. South Korea gave money to Ghana to build a university. Valerie, thank you so much. Now you know where to get the books. Busiso, you'll be the last one. Unity, self-hate. You are absolutely correct. I think that's why the first liberation is here in the mind. It's like beauty. You have to believe you are beautiful, and then you exude it from within. Confidence comes from within. It doesn't come in the centerpiece of the pupils of your eyes. Education, I spoke about Germany, vocational education. Ours I don't know how we got to a point where we say 30% it's a pass. How we closed nursing colleges, Ambach, technical colleges, teachers training colleges. No wonder when UJ opened, after all of these things were closed, all of us went there, there was a stampede. A mother who brought her daughter was trampled to death. OBE now, CAPS, why? We should have increased the standards, increased access, giving effect to this notion called an inclusive academic excellence to bring about social justice, public ownership of the 26 institutions of higher learning. Because the 26th to the 27th of June 1955 Freedom Charter, 10 principles. The 8th of those 10 principles says the doors of learning and culture shall be open. Principle 5 says land shall belong to those who work it. There is no possession greater than land. Even in our preamble to our constitution, not the main body of the constitution. It starts by saying, we the people, my words, not the politician. It says recognizing our past injustices. It then implores and mandates both you and I to fix these past injustices. And it ends with a hymn by Enoch Sontongwa, written in 1856, Nkosi Sikelel' Afrika, a hymn which went on to become the national anthem of 5 African countries, including Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Tanzania. And our forebears gave us this magnificent gift of reconciliation. One flag, one national anthem from the healing song. And they took absolutely the worst of the National Party apartheid, the stem, and bolted it together. The last stanza is the English section of the stem, and it ends with that last line that says, and we shall live and strive for freedom in South Africa, our land. And yet the last land audit in 2017 says of farms owned by individuals, 72% is owned by white males, 10% by colored people, 5% by people of Indian extraction, and only 4% by Africans. And yet in our constitution, there's section 25, article 3A, that talks about land reform, land restitution, land redistribution, and land development. And the 8th line from the bottom says, of article 3, when conditions of fair and equitable have been adequately fulfilled in the public interest, compensation will be down to 0. There's land expropriation without compensation. By the way, the 1913 Land Act was the 10th land expropriation without compensation perpetrated against African people. Sibusisa Zgwane, allow me to close maybe with just 2 no more than 3 things. 1, the pandemic has taught us that when fisher women can't go out to sea, they repair their nets.
Yes, Prof, I think you've covered everything. I'm not sure whether you've left another question, but I think you've covered all the questions, Prof.
I've covered all of them. I'm closing now.
Yes, you can make some. Yes, you can make some good.
Yes. So I was just saying as I'm closing, the pandemic has taught us an amazing thing. You see, when fisher women can't go out to sea, they repair their nets. What are you and I doing to repair our nets? Today, it's 512 days of national lockdown. At a personal level, with our key relationships and significant others, but also in our businesses. The second one says, a child that is not enveloped by his village will burn it down in order to feel its warmth. Last one. It says we must build our own businesses so that we hire our own children, because it's absolute madness to continue to make babies and send them to a different neighborhood, to go on their knees and ask somebody else for a job. Education matters, because when one steadily burns the midnight oil, one gets access to the domain of knowledge and wisdom, the world of meaning, the world that cannot be conquered without a persistent crusade. Ngiyabonga kakhulu Nkosi yami.
Wow, 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 wow. We don't have to, I can't even explain how we are grateful, how much we benefited from your conversation today. Thank you for honoring our invitation. We have benefited immensely. I hope this is the last time we engage with you. I can see the audience was just vibrant. They wanted more time, but time wasn't on our side. But thank you so much for making such a meaningful to us as young people. I mean, we're grateful to have leaders like you, and keep up the great work. Keep on bringing inspiration to all of us. We are so grateful, Nate Mohale. And to all of you who joined us today, thank you so much for your comments. Thank you so much for your questions. Key takeaways. Unity is very important, that we come together as Africans, particularly young people, right? And then number two, it's important that we decide on the leaders that we elect. It's important that we play a role in choosing the correct leaders that will usher us into greatness. I mean, if it calls for us to evacuate or remove the old folks, who are leading us, let it be so. So it's important that we make a proper decision, especially when it comes to elections. Make sure that you choose the correct. At that point, it's about education. Education is very key. There's no way we can empower ourselves without education. That is why our icon, the great Nelson Mandela, once said, education is the most powerful weapon we can use to change the world. Education can liberate our minds. So with those closing remarks, we are very grateful that Mohale. Thanks for sharing. Let's just keep on having these conversations, pursue them on social media, etc. Thank you very much. Thanks a million times. It's always a pleasure to have a conversation with you. Have a nice day and be safe. Thank you. We've reached the end of our, and also please express our sincere gratitude to Ms. Karen Foster,